Craig Daniel. This is my Lotus Exige. I can't believe I've owned this car for 7 years now. I've learned some interesting things about it over the time. So if you're interested in owning a Lotus, or just interested in what it's like to own a Lotus, I'm going to show you some quirks that I found about it. So I'm going to start with the interior, then I'm going to work my way around the exterior, and then we're going to take it for a drive, and I'm going to show you some things that I learned about that. So let's go inside. So let's talk about getting in the vehicle. Now, everybody can suspect that getting in the vehicle is probably not that easy because it's so small and low. It's not that terrible. You know, after 7 years of ownership, you get pretty used to it. The interesting aspect is getting in and out with an object, with something in your hands. So if you have something, anything that you're going to take with you, if you want to get out of the car, it's next to impossible to get out. So what you got to do is you put the item on the outside, you get out. I usually use the steering wheel and the base here to help myself out, and then you're good to go. Now getting in is kind of the same thing. So you can get in. If you're pretty agile, just slide yourself in there. I like to use the steering wheel to brace myself in. So usually you want to put it on the seat before you get in. So now that we're in the car, we want to get going, right? We put on our seatbelt. I got these racing seatbelts, so I'm not sure if it's the same thing for a regular seatbelt, but I'll get myself buckled in like this. And oh man, it's a hot summer day. I want to roll down the window, but I can't roll it down from this side. So instead of fiddling with that, I'll just unbuckle myself, roll down the window like that. Whew, now I'll buckle myself back in. It's not terrible, but you just want to make sure that you know if you want to roll down the window before you take your drive, because while you're driving, it's going to be very difficult to actually roll it down. Another thing that doesn't really bother me too much, but I've had other people drive this car and it be an issue for them, and it's the foot room in between the pedals. As you can see, the foot room is not that wide. Now I wear size 10, and these are actually skinny shoes. I have some wider shoes that kind of create an issue, but you can see you could possibly be hitting the brake and the sidewall here at the same time if you have a wider foot. I've never had or heard of a manual car where you could just push the start button without putting the clutch in to start it. This is one of those cases. Now, I don't know how I came upon it. I think my foot accidentally slipped off the clutch when I pressed start one time, and it just started right up. So I found that interesting. Any other Lotus owners out there, let me know if that's normal or if that's something that the previous owner did to this car. Let me know. So that's really all the quirks about the inside that I found interesting. Now let's take a walk around the outside and I'll show you a couple things. The amazing design feature of the Lotus Exige is brought to you by a front and rear clam. You can notice that there's no separation between the left and right side of the car. There is no quarter panels, and with that being said, it can be a very expensive fix if you happen to damage a certain section of the front or rear clam. Now, obviously, you don't ever plan on having an accident, but you just want to make sure that you're aware of that and to be extremely careful in that aspect. So I've had my headlight go out on me a couple times, and in order to change the headlight in this car, it's not like a normal car where you could just open the hood, change the bulb out, close the hood, and you're good to go. In this car, it's a little bit more of a process. You have to jack up the car, take the wheel off, remove the plastic inners of the fender, unscrew the headlight, and then you could change the bulb, and then obviously reverse those steps to put it back on. So it's a little bit more of a process. You want to make sure you get a bulb that's going to last. So if you're someone like me that likes to work on the car yourself, one thing you got to know is that if you're going to be going under the car specifically, it's going to take a little bit more time than it would on a normal car. Now, obviously, if you're going to have a car like this, you don't mind spending a little extra time doing things, but you got to know that changing the oil in this car, for example, you have to remove a metal sheet that flattens the bottom of the car. Now that's for aerodynamic purposes, but in order to remove it, it's, I believe, 12 nuts and bolts to drop that, and then you're able to work on the car from underneath there, and obviously you got to put that back on, so it's a little bit of a headache. But a good thing about this car is when you got to jack it up, there's a jack up point, which is this blue sticker here, which is dead center in the weight of the car. So when you jack up that point, it actually jacks up the whole side of the car, so you can work on the front wheel and the back wheel at the same time. So for example, if I'm doing the brakes, you jack it up at that one point, this whole side comes up, and you can take off this tire and that tire, and it's actually really convenient. Another interesting thing is if you're walking up to your car and you want to put stuff in the trunk, there's no button on the key like they do have nowadays to open up the trunk. Now, I have a aftermarket key fob, but the stock key fob is essentially the same with the two buttons. What you have to do is you have to walk around to the driver's side, pull the latch inside the door, and then it'll pop right up and you can put the stuff in. It's just a little interesting thing that you need to know, that a little extra step you got to take to put stuff in the trunk. So now let's get to driving the car. So when you first start driving the car, there's no temperature that shows up on the gauge. And what that does is it actually limits the rev limiter of the car. You can see on the gauge that there's no actually red line like there is on normal cars. The Lotus, the computer tells it not to go past a certain number, certain RPM. I believe in this car it's 5,500 or about 5,000 RPMs when the car's cold. So the display doesn't show a temperature until it reaches about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And once it reaches that temperature, the rev limiter starts rising until it reaches its optimal temperature, which is around 190, 200 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the weather outside and conditions and stuff like that. But then you can get up to full range of RPMs, roughly around 8,000 or so. An odd thing to me is the placement of the traction control button. So in order to turn the traction control off, you have to press and hold it. And then to turn it back on, you just got to press it once. Doesn't seem like an issue, but the placement is right next to my knee. And I've done this many of times during autocross, and at first I couldn't figure out what was happening. Where when you're taking a really hard left turn, your knee moves, as you're turning. You're moving left and right. So my knee would hit the button, press it, and then turn traction control back on, which would, limit the power around the turns. So it would essentially ruin my runs. There's a simple solution to that. Just put a bottle cap over the top and secure it with painter's tape. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Problem solved, and I'm able to go about my runs without having to worry about hitting my knee on the traction control button. There we go. There's a couple quirks and interesting facts that I found over the years of ownership. 7 years. I can't believe it. It goes by in a blink of an eye. But there we go. I know there's probably a couple other things that I found, but I just can't remember right now. Anyway, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Until next time, let me know what videos you want me to make or anything. I'll let you know if I can do it. Till then, I guess I gotta go play.